All right. So today we got a guy who was born with the name of Jeff Fair, but I think he's always been, known for and gone by Docfair. A single word, living in Arnold, Maryland, just outside of Annapolis. Hit high school in Annandale, Virginia. Raised in a military family. Father was a West Point grad. Went on to earn a bachelor's degree from Kent State, master's from the University of North Dakota, and doctorate in education at Oklahoma State University. Now retired sports medicine trainer spanning 4 decades. First job, 25-year stint at Oklahoma State, followed by an 18-year tenure at the United States Naval Academy. Fun fact, he was made the honorary member of the USNA class of 2015. So that's pretty cool. Hobbies, making bowls with the wood lathe. He has a passion for creating things with his hands, also serves as a chairman of the Lions Youth Foundation. And you've got a Wikipedia page your youngest son put together. I took a look. It's pretty cool. And you've got a patent on 3 things. I know of one. We've talked about it on here before, but there's 2 other things. What were those 2 things?
Well, the cowboy collar was probably the most famous thing. The other thing was called a sprained ankle orthosis. And
Okay.
basically what it was a heel cup with a lateral heel wedge. And the reason I came up with it is that if you're from Oklahoma, you'd be familiar with the Smith brothers. The Smith brothers were 3 very famous wrestlers. John Smith was like an Olympic champion, and Pat Smith, his one younger brother, was a 4-time NCAA champion. Before he went to the NCAA championship, trying to win his 4th championship, he sprained his ankle. And you've been on wrestling mats before, and when you step down, your ankle just kind of wobbles anyway. So we worked like crazy to try to get that ankle well, and I made this heel cup for him to put in his wrestling shoe. And it worked pretty well. He went on to win his 4th NCAA championship.
Nice.
And I took it to a company that made things for the athletic training room called Kramer's. And they made a mold for it and sold it for several years.
Nice. What was the other one? There's a third one.
It worked well for the midshipmen because it's something they could stick in their shoe and go to class with.
Yeah, no doubt. Did you have a third one?
The third one was the anchor shoulder harness.
Anchor.
The anchor was named after, of course, in the Navy. It was something I came up with there at the academy. And it was a harness to limit the range of motion of the shoulder for people who have subluxed or dislocated their shoulder.
Gotcha. Yeah, I bet you Matt Nishak probably wore that one. Maybe Tidwell too.
Yeah, I should have patented the Bobby McLaren club. And if you remember that.
Yeah, that Air Force goal line stand that made ESPN.
The story behind that, he broke 2 bones in his hands, and he wanted to play so bad, and the Air Force game was coming up. And Bobby was just tough as nails. I talked to the doctor. I said, if I can come up with something protected, can he play? And the doctor said he could. So I was taking a shower, getting ready to go into work, and all of a sudden it hit me. We had a boxing team, and they had a lot of boxing gloves. So I went over and got a pair of boxing gloves, tied his wrist into it so they couldn't bottom out. So he always had about that much air in front of his hand.
Nice.
The only problem was it was pretty big. And before the ball game, the officials always come in and they ask you, do you have any casts or pads or anything you want
Something
me to check?
hard.
And I said, well, I got one. I brought him in, and the guy sits there and feels it. And he goes, well, I guess that's okay. So we go out and play the game, and we come down right to the end of the ball game. And Air Force has got the ball, and they throw this long pass. And the big screen we've got up at the end zone. And out of the screen, you see the ball flying in the air, and all of a sudden this big old boxing glove sticks up and knocks the ball down.
Yeah.
The crowd goes crazy. I look over at the head coach at Air Force. He's going nuts. I think it's the first time
he's got an extension.
And all of a sudden, somebody grabs me by the neck, and it's Chuck Ladchuck, and he says, Jeff, you just earned your salary this year.
Nice. Good stuff. All right, let's roll into some memories. First one, Ian Meredith. He said, I gotta bring up, and I had the same question. Got to bring up the ice and stem remedy for literally every injury. Ice and stem it, baby.
Well, back in the day, they were used to argue about putting ice or heat on injuries, and they came up with this using electrical stimulation to speed up the healing. And I remember getting one at Oklahoma State. I think I traded some football tickets for it. And it worked great, especially on muscles. It was great as far as relaxing muscle spasms and things. And I think the first time I saw it used when I was with the Cleveland Browns. And through the research and stuff they did on it, is that it changed the variability of the cell wall to transmit fluids and reduce edema. And the nice thing about it was, too, it didn't take an athletic trainer standing right there taking care of the athlete. You could examine him, set him up, treat him while I take care of 2 or 3 other people. And especially the Naval Academy, that came in pretty handy, where you might be treating 20, maybe 25 guys at one time.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Good stuff. Curtis Bass, kind of a goofer. He said, ask him why that they never told me my foot was fractured, that it was just a bone bruise. You remember that?
Tony, I've gone back, especially to like the Brotherhood tailgate and stuff like that. And I have people come up to me and say, do you remember when I played with a broken leg? And I go, no. Well, it's a possibility that Curtis had a stress fracture in his foot. Stress fractures don't always show up.
I got you.
If he had a stress fracture, it probably didn't show up on the first couple x-rays.
Yeah, perfect segue into the next one from Cameron Marshall. He said, why did your daily routine consist of hazing guys with legit injuries? Or was that just a PJ thing?
The thing about the training room, you tried to make it kind of on the light side, because you always felt bad for the guys that are hurt, because being hurt was almost like having leprosy. You were almost excluded from the team. And I felt like it was part of my job to make sure that the injured athlete understood that he was still part of the team. He was going to get well, and try to be positive about it. And I tried to do it with a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And sometimes
that makes sense. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Cliff Dooman, a recent guest. He said, awesome, great guy, all in, that you come up with super creative braces, pads to get guys out on the field. Created the cowboy collar, of course. Always had a towel around your neck and had a candy bar at halftime, or a few candy bars at halftime. He said, funny story from the Poinsettia Bowl. And we thought the nightly meetings were over, that you took all the leftover candy bars for game day. But the problem was offense wasn't done yet. And Ken came out there, Coach Ken, looking for peanut butter cups, and they were all gone.
Always try to save a peanut butter cup for Coach Ken.
Nice.
But what I did with we got the candy bars from King Hall. And King Hall there were several things that I had trouble dealing with working at the Naval Academy. One was military medicine, and 2 was King Hall. You guys were always starving to death, and it always seemed like I had trouble, getting things from there. So that's why I collected the candy bars in case we weren't going to get them the following week. I never knew for sure.
Gotcha. Bit of a logistician.
Actually, I was going to repurpose them.
Gotcha.
Tell you a great story is we would practice on Saturdays, and Coach would have me talk with the team and say what time the training room's open. And I would say, we'll have a continental breakfast for you in the locker room. So one day he looks over to me and says out loud, Docfair, what's a continental breakfast? I said, Coach, it's whatever King Hall sends us.
Gotcha. Whatever's in the closet.
Whatever they got left over there.
Awesome. All right, a couple more. Kevin Campbell. What's the full story on the cowboy collar? We can go ahead and go into that right now.
Okay.
You developed this thing. I mean, what's the story on it? The reason, the development process?
When I was at Oklahoma State, we had a lot of guys that had brachial plexus injuries, and that's the nerve that runs down the neck, down into the shoulder. And,
did you hear my neck crack right there?
That's right. And you probably got some bone spurs in your neck. But anyway.
I'm sure.
And back then, we didn't have really good strength coaches. if we had anybody, it was somebody that just kind of worked out and helped with the team a little bit. And they really hadn't gotten into building up the neck and working on the weight room. So the thing that they had available was they looked like horseshoes. You remember the thing looks like
Yep.
called a horse collar. And what I noticed was if you ever try to pull a nail out of a piece of wood and you can't get the hammer to go, so what you do is you stick a piece of wood under the hammer and it increases the angle of pull, and you can pull out the nail. That's what I noticed about those horseshoe collars is the head would go to the side and it would be there, and you would go up over the top of it and you would stretch the neck even worse on the other side. So not only did it not protect it, it made it worse. So I looked at the natural curvature of the spine and how the football helmet set on the head. So I made something that would actually cradle the helmet and imitate the curve of the spine. And I had to come up with the right materials. That was always a problem. I got a company out of, where were they located? Their name was McDavid. They were two brothers. I got them interested in it, and they helped me with the materials, and together we worked and designed this thing. And I had an intern at the time from Ohio State, a good friend of mine. And he said, Jeff, he says, you know, if you ever sell a lot of those things, you'll probably get a free backboard with a dozen. Intimating that it wasn't going to work. But the thing is there's two things about the cowboy collar. One, it looked cool. Everybody wanted to look cool. Okay. Two,
Sure.
It actually worked. I took the final prototype and put it on one of my linebackers. And I went out to practice, and I watched him go through the defensive tackling drills. And he went to the third station, hit the guy head on, fell to the ground, and I'm watching him make sure you get up. He jumped up, turned around, and ran all the way across the field to me. And he says, this thing works.
Nice.
I knew I had something going on that.
Cool. Very cool.
One last story on that.
Yeah, go for it.
We're playing in the Holiday Bowl. Barry Sanders is running all over the place, and we put out their best running back in the first quarter. Okay. And, you know, there's always a sideline girl, and they're always really cute. And they always check with the trainer because when they check with them, when there's somebody that's hurt. So I'm kind of flirting with her, and I'm talking to her, and somebody says something about the cowboy collar, and I show her one. She said, I would love to do a segment on the cowboy collar on the sideline. So I'll give you the high sign, and then we'll have you on the air. You know, Holiday Bowl, it's a big time bowl.
Nice, yeah. Sell it, baby.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going, this is great. So every time we get ready to shoot it, Barry Sanders scores. He scored 5 times in that ball game, and it never got on air.
Oh, man. Bummer. Well, maybe if nowadays they'd probably clip it into a YouTube thing, and you could share the heck out of it, right? Cool. Last one, talking about Oklahoma State. Craig Carter. So another previous guest, Oklahoma State baller from the early 70s, and his son, one of my peers at Navy football. He said, ask Docfair about the time when OSU was playing ISU, I'm guessing Iowa State, and an OSU player came off the bench to tackle an ISU quarterback.
We went to Ames, Iowa, and it's always a crummy place to play, and it always seemed like in November it was cold, but this was their old football. It wasn't even asked if it was grass and it was muddy. And our head football coach was named Jim Stanley. He played for Bear Bryant at Awardee coach before Alabama. A&M, I think. Anyway, he was one of Bear Bryant's players and just tough as nails. This guy was, I'll tell you what, he was tough. And so he's walking up and down the sideline, and Bum Phillips, I don't know if you're familiar with Bum Phillips, but he was the defense coordinator. Bum Phillips was the coach for the Oilers and pretty famous down in Texas. And we're getting beat first half, so I figured, well, we're going to go in and Bum's going to make some changes at halftime, and so the defense is a little more effective against their running game. Well, we come back out, and nothing changed, and we're still getting beat pretty bad. So I'm standing on the sidelines, and our defense is in the game, and I'm talking to Craig. Craig's offensive lineman, and I don't know what we're talking about. And all of a sudden, we look up, and one of their tailbacks breaks loose and is running down the sideline. Nobody close to it. And all of a sudden, there's this hellacious tackle right in front of me. And I look to the right, and Craig's missing. Craig made this great tackle from the sideline. They gave the kid a touchdown. I thought Coach Stanley, who, like I said, was tough as nails, was going to chew a hole in his head. That was something.
Nice.
That was quite a memory.
Cool. Last one from him, and then I'll turn it over to you. Ask about your friendship and relationship that you have with a late great Olympic gold medal track and field star, Jesse Owens, 1974.
I got a chance to meet Jesse Owens. My team doctor at Oklahoma State was a mover and a shaker. He was with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the president's fitness, whatever it was, committee or whatever it was. But he had made a lot of friends over the years and had gone to the Olympics, and he knew Jesse Owens. And we went to the, what was it, the Fiesta Bowl. And evidently Jesse at the time lived there in Phoenix. And he came over to visit, and he talked to the team. And I got a great picture with Jesse, quite a gentleman.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what he mentioned, the Fiesta Bowl, and he actually got him to come in as a keynote speaker for a dinner.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
That's back when, you went to bowl games, you actually won a lot of football games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little different, right? Jesse Owens, connection to Arnold Schwarzenegger, looking at your Wikipedia page, looking at your journals and publications, professional meeting presentations. I saw one that's anabolic steroids. Did that come from Jesse Owens, or are you just into that?
No, look, you got to remember, I've been doing this for quite a while. And back in the 70s, all the scientific study says that anabolic steroids didn't work. Well, on our football team at Oklahoma State, there were some kids that disproved that fact. And the thing was that all the studies were done, and because they were on human subjects, you had to give the amount of anabolic steroids at the prescription level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, these football players weren't taking prescription level. They were taking 10, 20, 50 times the amount of the prescription. And it was working. These kids were putting on a lot of muscle, and that's where the NCAA came in and started some testing.
Yeah, no doubt. I've been listening to Ric Flair. Just got done with the Hulk Hogan podcast with Joe Rogan, and this is definitely a different time. All right, that's it. Turn it over to you. Story time.
I thought I'd mention something about the NCAA.
Okay, go for it.
I have never been a fan of the NCAA.
Okay.
Because it always seemed like they were a day short, dollar light on the things that they were trying to work with. And the problems that the athletic trainers had for years, it seemed like they would show up after the trainers had been dealing with it, and they'd send you a letter and give you all these things you had to do. They always had more work. Anytime I got a letter from the NCAA, it meant more work for me.
It seems like regulatory agencies have a tendency to do things like that, and it's usually reactive, right?
And thinking back, and concussions are a big topic nowadays.
Yeah.
Well, back in the 60s and 70s, we treated concussions with a lot of seriousness. We knew it was a severe injury, and we talked about it as actually having a bruised brain. The brain sits in the fluid in the skull, and when you hit something, it bounces around. And we realized that was a severe closed head type injury that we had to treat very carefully. And it seemed like in the 60s, now, I don't know if you remember this, but football helmets used to have a suspension system in it. It looked like the Army helmet with a suspension system. and then it kind of went to a padded system, then it kind of went to an air system, and it's kind of gone back and forth.
Yeah, the suspended one sounds like it's just like
Oh,
banging up.
it was something. I can remember in North Dakota actually sewing some of those things together to fix them. It wasn't a lot of protection at all.
Yeah.
And actually having the plastic dent or break. But of course, with the rule changes now, I'm trying to get the head out of it with the tackling and things like that. I think they've had some success with the rule changes. But it always bothered me, and it made it sound like that the sports medicine end didn't take concussions seriously. And I think we treated them wisely back then. And I don't know if we treated them a whole lot differently back then than we do now, except that it gets more publicity.
Yeah, that whole suspension helmet thing, it's kind of like the argument in boxing versus MMA, UFC, where is the boxing worse on the head because of that pad strike versus just bone to bone type of strike, small pad. What are your thoughts on CTE? Junior Seau.
That really concerns me. What concerns me most is that they feel like a lot of it is through smaller concussions and through a lot of repetitions of having concussions, not necessarily big ones.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, what I found was sometimes kids would get dinged, what we call just a little bit, and they would have more symptoms and have trouble recovering more so than the athlete that got actually knocked unconscious.
Yeah.
So I think the repetitive hits to the head, that's kind of scary. And I like the idea of keeping younger kids out of contact until a little later when they get in their teens.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know if with those rule changes, the NCAA, and I don't know how successful I would have been without being able to use my head. But at the same time, definitely probably agree with you. It's the right thing. It's just not as fun to watch anymore, but it's healthier probably. Yeah.
It's gotten to the point where I don't understand all this portals and transfer rules. It seems to me like we've ruined college football with that.
Yeah, Bobby Doyle would know more. Jeff Lenard as well, probably. But I'm not a subject matter expert on that topic. So yeah, tell from the beginning. Who's Docfair?
Back in high school, all my friends went out to play football. At the time, I was about 5'8", about 114 pounds. So I took a home course from Kramer's Chemical Company, the company that actually made that sprained ankle orthosis I talked about. And when I got time to go to school, they were interested in actually giving me a book scholarship if I would be a student trainer at Kent. So I worked as a student trainer there and learned a lot from watching my peers and also the professionals. And in about 1970 was the first national test to be certified as an athletic trainer. This was about a 3-hour written test and about a 2-hour practical exam to see if you had the book knowledge and the ability to take care of athletic injuries. And I think that's when athletic training came out of the area where the guy carried a bucket with a ladle in it to give the kids a drink of water if they were lucky enough to get that. And the distance we've come from the 1950s to now is just amazing. I mean,
man, so many people be dropping if that were the case.
It was just amazing, the precautions and the knowledge we have now taking care of our athletes. I honestly think that probably the best medical care that Tony Haybear had in his life was when he was on the football team. Because I got in trouble a few times because Navy medicine didn't quite understand college athletics. They thought the Naval Academy was a military installation. And it was hard to get across that you guys had to be ready to play on where the orange and gold, the blue and gold on Saturday to get ready to play. So it took some education on my part to get military medicine, Navy medicine, to kind of catch on to that.
Gotcha. Well, what comes next?
Who was the team doctor when you were there, Tony? Do you remember?
Taglia, maybe?
What a great guy. I kept track of him. He went to Seattle and was an orthopedic surgeon up there. And somehow he got a gig at being the team doctor for the Powder Puff women's football team. It was so funny.
Wonder how that transition went.
I don't know, but probably not very well.
Gotcha. So, next in the story.
Well, the newest one is I've been nominated for the National Athletic Trainers Association Hall of Fame.
Gotcha.
And it's reserved for people that have been innovative in the field, done a lot to advance athletic training. And when I was at Oklahoma State, I started the Oklahoma State Trainers Association with the athletic trainers in the state. And the Speaker of the House actually lived in Stillwater. So I convinced the athletic director and the legal counsel at Oklahoma State to let me invite the Speaker of the House to take a football trip. It was actually to Iowa State. And I talked to him on the plane all the way up. I had him watch what we did as the athletic trainers taking care of the team. And I talked to him all the way back. And when I got back, he told me to contact his legislative assistant and have her draw up the Athletic Training Licensure Act so that athletic trainers would be licensed in the state of Oklahoma. And we got that passed, and I believe it was 1981. Pretty proud of that fact. That the stories of other states have taken years to get something like that through.
Yeah.
And I guess it really helped to have the Speaker of the House there in Stillwater.
Yep.
And to drag him along to one of the games.
Awesome. Cool. So, Oklahoma State, any cool memories from that stand out to you, like throughout all those years, like the funnest time or?
I'll give you an example. You talked about my nickname being Docfair.
Docfair.
It's all one word. And the reason it started to be all was Dexter Manley. Dexter Manley used to call me Docfair.
Okay.
I know. Are you familiar with Dexter?
No, I'm not.
Dexter Manley was probably the best defensive back in pro football in the college.
Nice.
He played for the Washington Redskins. Probably would have been as famous as some of the running backs like Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas that I took care of if he hadn't had some problems.
Gotcha.
Barry Sanders, I don't know how much you guys know about Barry Sanders, but he was a fine young man.
Yeah, Dallas Cowboy.
Barry Sanders?
Yeah. Right?
Barry's with the Detroit Lions.
Oh, he was Lions. I thought he was a Cowboy.
He was Detroit Lions.
Oh, man, I'm way off.
I would have 10
Dion, my bad.
I would have 10 pro scouts at practice to come to watch him practice.
Bit of a transition there going from Oklahoma State then to Naval Academy.
Well, there's a reason I did that.
What was that?
Things have started to change and the type of athletes that they recruited there. And because the way the setup was, is that the coaches would go out and recruit and basically leave the team with me when it was off season. And I was everything from the disciplinarian to trying to find out why they're not going to clean, name it. And I had to deal with a lot of that. And I had an opportunity to go back sort of my roots for the military and mentioned I went to Annandale High School. And that's not too far away from the Naval Academy.
Yeah. And
I can remember coming up for a track meet one time in indoor track there in, what was it? I remember stepping outside and thinking what a great place this was. It'd be a neat place to work. And that was when I was about 15 years old. So it kind of came true.
Awesome. Cool. You mentioned your father was in the military, West Point grad. How was that for you growing up? I'm thinking West Point back then, from a disciplinary standpoint, it's probably spot on.
Yeah, my dad was he he went to the prep school and went through West Point in 3 years. It was right during the war. Graduated in 1946, and I was an only child for about 7 years. And it was back then the housing was horrible for the military. As the officers had to live off post and get whatever they could find. And Dad was a true West Point graduate. He was spit and polish, and he said a true fine officer.
What do you end up doing?
He started out in the artillery. In fact, we went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where he was learned to be an artillery officer. And then they sent him to grad school at Berkeley. He got a degree in some kind of nuclear biology of some kind, and he ended up being a chemical corps officer. And when we lived in Annandale, he actually worked at what's the Fort Belvoir.
Okay.
And I never knew what he did. He never said what he did there. One time I went to pick him up, and I drove our second car that didn't have a post sticker on it. And I drove up to where his office was, and two MPs grabbed the door, yanked me out of the car.
Nice.
Come to find out years later, he was teaching people how to run a nuclear reactor there at the facility.
That must have been a pretty sharp guy then. Cool. Well, so at Navy, let me go ahead. I got some rapid fire questions, kind of like I did with Dooman.
Okay.
Favorite class?
Gee. There were 18 of them. I figured out one time that almost had 10,000 football players and 520 Division I football games.
Yeah, so you've seen it all.
And I really would have a hard time picking out one. I have to say, I feel close to 2015 because they were nice enough to make me a honorary member of the class. Can I tell you a story about that?
Yeah, go for
it. Paul Johnson's famous for some of his offhand comments.
Yeah.
And I remember watching graduation on TV one time. In fact, I almost liked watching graduation on TV because I could see what was going on better. So I'm watching it, and all of a sudden, near the end, they said, now, we have 2 or 3 was honorary members of the class. And they panned over and looked, and there was Coach Johnson. They made him an honorary member of the class. And I thought, what an honor. I mean, holy smoke. I mean, could you ask for anything more than that? And the following week, I saw him, and I said, Coach, I saw you at graduation. And I said, what an honor to be a member, an honorary member of the class. And he went, That was his comment.
Yeah.
He kind of blew it off, but that's the way he was. Like, no big deal.
Yeah, okay. On to the next one. Yeah. Cool. How about who spent the most time in the training room?
Oh, boy. Maybe it was Darrell Hill. You know Darrell?
A little bit. Met him a couple times. Linebacker.
Darrell Hill was one of my favorites. He played way above his ability, and he was a really tough kid. And military life and a lot of the classes he took kind of drove me crazy. And I would sit there and tape his ankles, and I'd say, Darrell, how's that chemistry class going? And he would just go nuts. I mean, he would just go absolutely insane.
Yeah.
To calm him down.
That was one of my worst subjects, for sure. How about hardest worker? Hardest work ethic? Someone that stood out to
you? That's the one thing that endears me to the athletes we had at Navy. They all were hard workers. They were all hard-nosed, and they all played above their ability. And the one thing that Paul Johnson always impressed me was he got more out of his teams than I worked for Jimmy Johnson at Oklahoma State than Jimmy Johnson did. So it's kind of hard to nail down just one of them. They were all
Gotcha.
all stuff.
How about a favorite game?
All beaten Notre Dame first time. That was cool.
Nice.
I love that.
How about a favorite bowl game?
Oh, okay. I got a great bowl thing. We go we go to play Missouri. I forget what bowl game it was. Texas Bowl or
Texas.
something like that. Yeah,
Texas Bowl 2009.
right. And as you know, being in Oklahoma State, I was in the Big Eight for 20 years, and we played Missouri every year. That was a great conference. So I go down there. And I knew a couple of the assistants, and I said, "How you guys doing?" Always before the ball game, if you guys get a guy hurt on my sidelines, I'll take care of him and stuff like that. They're sitting there kind of kicking the turf, and I said, "What's up?" He says, "We were hoping for a better bowl game, but we're here, so we'll play."
Yeah, maybe that's what gave us an edge that day.
And I looked at the guy and I said, "You better tell your kids to put on their jock straps tight. These guys are going to kick your ass." And they backed up and looked at me like that. After the ball game, I went over there and they're hanging their heads.
Yeah.
That was it. That was my favorite one.
Awesome. Yeah, you gotta love it when they come in and that type of tone is there.
Beaten Army 14 times.
Yeah. There you go. Funniest coach.
Oh, that had to be Paul Johnson. Dry humor. I'll tell you a story about that I've told some of the other kids. We had a fullback that had a little crack in his fibula, which is the small bone in the lower leg. And so I talked to the doctors, and we had a plan. I was going to make a pad. They were going to give him some medication and stuff like that so he could play in the Army-Navy game. And I explained it to him, and I said, it's real important that we kind of keep this between ourselves. You don't want anybody else to know it, because if Army finds out, the first thing they're going to do is their linebackers
Attack
come in and shoot for your leg.
Yeah.
He sat there and listened to me. He walks out the door, and I hear him in the locker room, and he goes, "I got a broken leg." So anyway, we go through the whole routine, medication, the pad, the whole bit. He gets out there. First series, he takes the ball. Army linebacker comes in and breaks his other fibula and his other leg. He's now got two broken legs.
Nice. Didn't see that one coming, I guess.
The good thing about that is that's how I got an x-ray machine for the training unit.
Nice. Yes, sometimes it takes those types of circumstances to get what you need, right? How about last one, the oddest pre-game ritual that you've ever
I'll tell you the one that drove me crazy, Tony, is we had a bunch of kids back in the 97, 98, 99 that everybody would throw up before the ball game.
Oh, man.
It was unbelievable. What happened was we'd have a couple kids that were nervous and would throw up. Well,
yeah. I've never done that.
As soon as you get one throwing up, everybody else started gagging and they're throwing up. And that drove me nuts. It finally died out, thank goodness.
Gotcha. Cool. Switch it up a little bit. What's your take on, seeing different types of recruits come in under different coaches, different recruiting methods, your time there? How was that experience?
Well, when I started out with Charlie Weatherby, he was the coach when we started out, and we had almost 200 guys on the football team. And at Oklahoma State, you're only allowed to have 105. And I remember a coach saying, "I want everybody to know the players' names." And he was talking to the coaches, talking about their players. Well, there was over 200 of them. And a lot of times when kids would come in, I'd say, "Are you a football player?" Because obviously we had wrestlers and other kids come in. But recruiting, it's a tough thing in the Naval Academy. I think it takes a special young man. And one of the things that really amazed me when I first got to the academy in '97 was I would ask them, "Why did you come to the academy?" And the answer was to play Division I football, which kind of surprised me because, I thought they'd say to become a Marine pilot or a Navy pilot or, that's what I thought they would say. But, the recruiting was hard. I mean, they literally would have to go to a school and say, who is your best, smartest football player? And the thing I heard a lot of, which I'm sure drove the coaches crazy too, is they would go into high schools and see a high school football coach, and they would say, I've got a guy that can play for you, which means they're not good enough to play for somebody else, but they can play for you.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of that. And then my other misconception was I thought all the football players that came to Navy were going to be pretty much injury post-operative free. They weren't going to have surgeries. They weren't going to have, problems. And we did. We had a lot of kids come in that had ACL repairs. They had, plates in their arms or legs, things like that, which made it difficult.
Gotcha.
Because you were dealing
before they came in.
So I was dealing with damaged goods before we even had first practice.
Gotcha. Goodness.
Yeah.
Interesting. How's the culture changed over time throughout your tenure at Navy?
Well, the thing that I remember when Charlie Weatherby was there, I would, for Thanksgiving, I would go over and buy 2 meal tickets at King Hall for Thanksgiving dinner. And Carolyn, my wife, and I, we'd go over and have Thanksgiving dinner with all the kids that were there because they weren't allowed to go home. They were on what we used to call double secret probation. What did they call that when you weren't allowed to leave the yard?
Yeah.
On restriction. That's what I was trying to think of.
I gotcha. There you go. Okay. I thought you were saying that's what it was called at that time, but yeah, on restriction. Gotcha.
Each table had a dozen seats, and we would fill up a whole seat with the restrictees, and my wife and I would have Thanksgiving dinner with them. And the thing that changed quite a bit was I saw that plebe summer wasn't as tough as it was when I got there in '97. Yeah. And the other thing is we had very few kids that were having trouble in the hall. And I don't know if that's because of our officer reps were doing a better job, but I was pretty proud of the kids for that. I mean, as you well know, keeping things straight in the hall and playing Navy football, that's a tough combination.
Yeah. So as time went on, it became a little more scattered.
I think it was, I don't know, kind of accepted to be a little bit of a renegade there in the hall a little bit. And today I think it's better to be a leader and stand out in the hall than to be a renegade.
I gotcha. All right. Talk about funniest coach. Did you have a favorite other type of coach experience?
Oh, there's tons of funny things that I can think of. I don't know. It's hard to come up with one. I always got a kick out of Charlie Weatherby. Charlie Weatherby was one of my quarterbacks at Oklahoma State.
Oh. And
when I interviewed here, of course, I'm not quite sure that he suggested I take the job, but Mr. Lingle hired me. And Charlie, it used to be we'd have a pep rally on Thursday night for the Army game. And we'd go down the end of Farragut Road and we'd have all the big bonfire and all of the brigade was there. And Charlie would get out on the stage. And when he got on the bus to ride from Ricketts Hall down to the end of Farragut, he would always hang up a shirt in the front of the bus. Couldn't figure out what it was for, but he would go out in front of all the mids in the brigade and scream and yell and rip his shirt off and then come back on the bus, put his new shirt on. We'd go to Philly.
Cool.
He was something. Charlie was a good quarterback.
Good stuff. What's been one of the biggest challenges in your career other than Navy medicine and dealing with King Hall?
I think the biggest thing was the hours.
Hours.
I remember one of the players said something to me, and I said, "Have you ever come over here when I wasn't here?" And he said, "No." And at Oklahoma State, I would put in about 10 hours a day probably. But here at the Naval Academy, I had to be here at 06 and wouldn't go home until probably 8 p.m., something like that. And that really wore on me. That's a long day.
Yeah.
And as an athletic trainer, you're not sitting down that whole time. You're up giving treatments, you're taping ankles, you're in the storeroom, you're going to meetings. And I think that was the hardest part, being sleep deprived.
Gotcha.
Because as a midshipman, you guys were lucky to get 4 hours. I think I was living on about 5.
I usually got at least 6 to 8, I think.
Did you
5 to
really?
anyways. Yeah. Well, it just depends on the day, right? Like,
I
where's the demand, and take advantage of the days you don't have it.
Right.
How about the favorite thing about it? What you really like about it, if anything? I'm guessing there was something.
Of my career?
Yeah, of career.
Oh, I think the greatest thing in my career is dealing with the athletes I had. The neatest thing was I never had to grow up because
Gotcha.
I always dealt with 18 to 22-year-old. Okay.
In Peter Pan mode.
I want you. Well, you've been in that training room. I want you to imagine here we
Yep.
are with all these teenagers in there, right?
You never had to worry about not having a joke lined up.
Oh my gosh! And some of the discussions were so funny. Everything from girls to politics. And the thing is, sometimes I wondered about the kids at Oklahoma State, about how smart they were. Sometimes the midshipmen were gullible, mainly because they were told to, anything I said, they were supposed to take us. And somebody was talking about marriage. They said, I wonder how old you should be when you get married. And they were talking about, 25, 30. And when the kid says, Docfair, how old were you when you got married? Well, I was 21. They said, oh, wow, I was pretty young. I said, yeah. I said, my wife was 14. It got real quiet in the training. They didn't know whether to laugh. They didn't know what to do. It was so funny. And then Dee Jones was in there, and she starts laughing, and the other assistants are, and they just howled at that.
Yeah, you got to help me get Dee on here one day. Well, cool. How about today's biggest challenge?
You got to remember that my job was periods of kind of boredom out there watching practice to almost terror or something really bad went wrong. And I had to adjust to things being pretty calm all the time. And I've always liked to make things with my hands. And I've got a wood lathe down in my basement. And my wife used to say she could tell how the football team was doing by how many bowls I would make on Sunday, because the more depressed I would get, the more bowls I would make. And it was good therapy. But they said things have slowed down quite a bit.
Gotcha. To slow down and got it.
I still walk several times a week with one of my chaplain friends.
Gotcha.
When we traveled, everybody had roommates. And nobody wanted a room with me, and nobody wanted a room with a chaplain. So I always ended up with a chaplain.
Nice.
So I ended up with quite a few chaplain friends over the years.
Good deal. You don't remember Chaplain Owens? Had him on here already. We just did another group session, and he was in on it. It was pretty good. I think it's the next one coming out.
Did you ask him about his book?
Oh yeah, in the first one we talked about his book a lot. Yep.
Read the first 2 pages.
Okay, I'll go back.
It's got me in there and talking about going to see Coach Johnson, see Coach Paul Johnson.
Yeah. This one I was just thinking about. How about the biggest team suffering event or disciplinary event during your time there?
Oh, I think at Oklahoma State, some of the things that we were put on probation twice, and that was really tough. It was because it was recruiting violations and things.
Gotcha.
And it made me think not too long ago about this deal where they're allowing players to be paid for their image. And I think I read where Oklahoma State were giving their athletes $3,500 above and over the cost of, fees, tuition, and books, and room and board. And now with this image thing, you get your quarterback is got his picture down at the pizza store downtown, and they're giving him $400 or $500 to do that. And I think it's really going to breed some discontent among the teams.
Yeah.
If I'm a lineman down there with the snot and the blood and my quarterback is back there dancing around making money at the picture in the pizza place, I don't understand where the NCAA thinks a lot of that ought to come in.
Yeah. I recently watched a documentary on Johnny Manziel. I don't know if you've seen that. It's on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's kind of a crazy story, but some people might figure out how to do it anyways with the rule intact. But that's where the probationary thing comes in. I don't know. It's a hard one to figure out for sure.
I really enjoyed playing in the Big 8 conference. And this thing with everybody changing conferences every year, just
it's different.
I would have a hard time naming the conferences, much less who's in them right now.
Yeah, it's all about the Benjamins.
I mean, the Big 8, every week you were going to play a tough team. If you were in the top 4 in the Big 8, you were pretty good.
Yeah. How about the biggest team? When I mean team suffering, team discipline, like when the whole team had to run, when the whole team had to do something. Yeah. Is there a certain one that stands out there?
Paul Johnson. My phone rang. It was just about lunchtime. He says, "Doc, get your stuff and get out on the field. I'm going to kill him." And I'm going,
be prepared.
Oh my gosh, what's going on? So I go out in the field. He's got them lined up in the end zone. And evidently, it was one of those things where you vote for the Rip Miller Award for the most outstanding plebe for spring football, and most improved or something like that. And somebody wrote something stupid down. I forget exactly what it was.
Was it Ricky Bobby Doyle?
That's what it was. And it just pissed off Coach bad. He was mad. And we go out. I was there. I'm out there. I'm going, he really is going to kill him.
Yep.
That was something. And there wasn't anybody to help me. I was there, all my staff was gone. I'm just standing up.
That was at nighttime.
It was something.
Yeah. Gotcha. Is there anything else in your story that you want to share?
Oh, I don't know. Like I said, I think the Navy Brotherhood means a lot to me. The highlight of my day is going down there and seeing the kids at the tailgate. And
gotcha.
I love seeing them walk up with their wives and their kids. And I follow them on Facebook a lot, and I'm sure you do Facebook too. And I see the guys that got pictures and they're in the Navy and traveling around. Then you see a picture of them with their fiance.
Yeah.
And then you see a picture of them with their fiance and a dog. And then all of a sudden you see her fiance who's pregnant or a baby.
Yep.
And you just love to see that transformation of a kid, from the young kid that you knew as a teenager, basically develop into a fine young family man. And so proud of those guys that come along and do a great career. Like
nice. That. I know a small group.
When I talk to them at the tailgate, they'll introduce me to their wife. I'll say, "Well, it's very nice to meet you." I said, "You realize I took care of him before you did."
Yeah. Good stuff. I know a small group of the class of 10 guys are going to try and make the Air Force game there in Annapolis this year. So hopefully I can make it. We'll see what happens.
Well, I hope so. I'd love to have you there. The tailgate is a fascinating thing. I mean, they've got players that that played 20 years ago to the guys that just graduated. It's a fun time.
I made it to my first one of those about say a year ago, of course. It was last year. It was right before I kicked this whole thing off. It was very impressive. It was cool. Last one. What's your price for admission?
Well, I was thinking about that too, the stuff you sent me. Was that I was thinking in 43 years that I was an athletic trainer, I had 43 years of two-a-days. Now, you've been through two-a-days. They don't have two-a-days anymore. They call it campus. They're allowed one practice a day. But two-a-days is, I would think of it a lot like boot camp. I mean, it is tough. It's a tested survival. And I think the fact that going through that with so many young men and finding that those kind of two-day practices where survival is the biggest thing really takes a team and knits them together. It's much like you guys have, and when you do your plebe summer, things are tough. You pull together, you help each other, and I think back, and I think of some of the most successful teams that I've worked with have used the two-a-days to pull together and coalesce into a really good team. And I think two-a-days is the price of admission. And since you've gone through those, I think you may understand that.
Gotcha. Awesome. You mentioned your wife's name. I forgot to write it down. What's your wife's name?
It's Carolyn.
Carolyn.
Carolyn, yeah.
Gotcha. I had an aunt named Carolyn.
We actually dated in high school.
Awesome. That's a long journey.
She's very understanding. I mean,
good for you.
The joke was, I told her that when the kids could talk to me, let me know.
Right.
Because I left before they got up, and when I got home, they were already in bed. It wasn't. I wish I'd had more time to spend with the kids. I think that's one thing I did miss.
Gotcha. Well, cool.
I did have a lot of teenagers.
How many?
The teenagers?
Yeah.
Well, all the football players, probably about 10,000. Yeah.
10,000?
I think that's, if you add up 105 or 120 football players a year at Oklahoma State, then about 200 a year here at the Naval Academy, and then as they rotate through, it's probably pretty close to that.
It's a lot of kids. Well, we appreciate you. I hope you keep on making wooden bowls. I'd like to see what one of those looks like. You got a sample near you?
Got them all around.
Nice. What kind of wood do you use?
Sometimes out of my backyard. Sometimes I buy it. I bought a piece of, what do you call it? Tiger wood. It was almost $80. And it really turned out to be a beautiful bowl.
Tiger wood.
Yeah, it's kind of a striped. It's really pretty.
Gotcha. Cool. Man, appreciate the time tonight.
Let me show you one of my prized possessions. Hang on.
All right, yeah, let's see it.
Is it?
Yes.
This is the game ball from the 2014 Poinsettia Bowl. Nice. That Coach Nehemiah gave me after the game.
Cool.
It was my last Navy game.
Last season, last game ball. Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, appreciate your time tonight. Thanks for getting on. I'm sure this will be good for a lot of folks. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, and really happy to have you on.
Well, I appreciate that. I think a lot of the players that I see at the tailgate, they always express to me that how much they appreciate the time and effort the athletic trainers took to take care of them. Yep. And I think we did a pretty good job. Everybody stayed safe, and we had some great wins, some disappointing losses, but it was a great brotherhood and a good thing to be part of.
Awesome. Long days and two-a-days.
Well, well, yeah, you remember two-a-days. They were tough.
Oh, yeah.
Do we have time for one more two-a-day story?
Absolutely.
This is when in Ricketts, they decided they were going to take the dormitory that was above and make offices.
Yep.
And that's where the football team stayed. And they had beds up there and it was air conditioned. It was very convenient. I mean, you just go upstairs and come back down for your meetings and things.
Heard stories about that.
They tore it up. And so they were going to put the football team in the 8th wing. And I went to the coach and I said, that's fine, but it's not air conditioned. I said, we're going to take our kids out, practice them twice a day, have them lose 10 or 12 pounds of fluid, and then stick them in the dormitory over there at 8th wing and have them sweat all night and come back and do the same thing the next day. I said, we're going to have kids dropping like flies. This is a healthy issue.
Just drink some fruit juice you read.
Well, what I did was, I was always pretty famous for thinking out of the box. I said, what I'd like to do is to go to Ollie's. Ollie's is a discount place where they have stuff that was like overstocked or things that didn't sell and they buy and put in their stores. I said, I want to go to Ollie's and I want to buy, I think it was 60 window air conditioners and put them in the windows there at 8th wing so the guys will have air conditioning during 2 days. Oh my gosh, you'd think I would. Everybody just went nuts. You can't do that. We had to get permission from the soup, the commandant, everybody on the Sun to put window air conditioners in the windows. And then the AD, we were talking about a fairly good expense. I mean, 60 air conditioners wasn't cheap, I think about $150 a piece or something like that. But 2 days before, 2 days were to start, one of the administrators came down to see me. He says, hey, come on, we got the trailer. We're going to go pick up those air conditioners. So that's what we actually did. We got window air conditioners and put them in the hall.
I was going to ask, did it get approved? And then by the time it get approved, it was summer over. But you answered that. So.
Well, everybody thought I was crazy until we did it.
Nice. Thinking outside the box.
That helped. Well, I'm sure, sleeping in, that was before Bancroft was air conditioned. It was just sleep in your own sweat. It was horrible.
Yeah, I was one of the lucky classes that had AC. So.
Yeah, I used to complain about that, and to get even, they put the air exchanger right outside my office.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Appreciate your time tonight.
All right, Tony.
Thanks for getting on.
Yeah. Any fan mail they can send directly to you, I guess.
Awesome.